Did you know that Pathologic 3 Quarantine actually has two endings? Normally after you time travel and speak with Eva, the game officially ends and sends you to the main menu. Pathologic 3's demo is a pretty linear experience, without many choices that have a greater impact on anything, so where does this other ending come in? Well, if you were to run out the clock until it hits 2 AM, you can get Quarantine's other ending. Once the clock hits this time, the Bachelor will shoot himself, just as if his apathy level was maxed out, but instead of the game automatically reloading a save, we're shown this screen. To hell with this town. These people, this plague, they cannot be saved. Better to start over. I don't want to. And then the game ends, and we're forced back out to the title screen. Achieving this ending is pretty much a player-made decision, since it'd be hard to naturally not beat the demo before the game hits 2 AM, which makes this something that many people won't see. Since the release of Quarantine, I've been building up a list of similar hidden details, secrets, fun facts, Easter eggs, and whatnot, which I'm going to share with you today. Some of these are details I missed on my first playthrough, others are details in the environments or character dialogue, and some are just random things I decided to take note of. Seeing as I've made a sort of series out of these fun fact videos, here's a collection of random Pathologic 3 Quarantine information that I, and hopefully you, will think is interesting. Seeing as clocks and time play a big role in Pathologic 3, let's start off with some clock-related things. Every exit gate in every district will feature a clock hanging from them, and every single one of these clocks work. Both hands on the clock will move, and it'll even accurately reflect the in-game time. It would have been cool if every clock in the game worked like this, but the only clocks that function are these exit gate ones. The designs of these exit gates and clocks slightly change depending on what district you're in. Most of the gates we see in the demo look like this. The arch will be made of stone, with a wheel hanging from it and the clock off-center. The gates will look like this in the skinners, hindquarters, marrow, and in parts of the gut. From the gut, the entrance to the warehouses will have a completely wooden gate without a clock, and the exit to the maw is made of metal with an intricate design. And the clock is centered in the middle here. Over in the Stillwater, the gate is made of brick, and the clock is perfectly centered here as well, and the nearby gate into the bridge square is pretty similar. Inside of the Stillwater, in the round room, there's been a new clock added here. This one is in the middle of the room under the water. Using the game's debug system, we can load levels and areas present in Quarantine. One of the levels available to load is the Stillwater during the first 3 days of the game. This version of the Stillwater has sheets covering all of the furniture, and here in the round room, the clock is missing, and instead we can see a drain for the water. It certainly is an odd place to install a clock, so I wonder if it's something only the Bachelor sees, or if it's some kind of reflection of his mind. Going over to the Capitol, the main hall of the Institute is very much clock-themed. The upper floors and railings have the Roman numerals of a clock built into them, and on top of that, the circular nature of the hall adds to the whole clock thing. On the ground, the XI numeral is glowing, and can be examined for a few thoughts. I'm not 100% sure on the meaning or reason for this glowing number, but I think it's meant to represent the 11th hour. The 11th hour is a saying that basically means the last possible moment to do something, and here after returning from the town, this is the Bachelor's last chance to save his lab. One last clock-related thing. I didn't notice this until embarrassingly recently, but the Q in Quarantine's title is a clock. During the back and forth the Bachelor has with the interrogator, both of them say a few lines that are pretty similar to the spoken lines we hear from them in the Quarantine release date trailer. Neither of them go word for word with the trailer, but it's basically the same conversation. For example, this spoken line,
I have returned from a hell beyond your darkest nightmares.
is similar to this in-game line where Daniel says, I've come back from a hell the phantasms of a nightmare could never portray. In another clip, Daniel and the investigator say this,
You abandon everything and rush to a distant town.
Yes, to seek an immortal man.
which is similar to this exchange here. You dashed off across the country to a backwater town to bring back what might be described as, yes, an immortal man. And last, in the trailer, Daniel says,
I am no executioner, no inquisitor, no lawman, no soldier. I am a doctor, a man of science.
which is pretty much the same as when Daniel says, not an exterminator or inquisitor, not a police inspector or army commander, I am a medical professional. While we're on the topic of the inspector in this interrogation, I want to show off this hard-to-see detail on the inspector's outfit. When sitting in front of him, you can see that he's wearing this pin, and if we were to take a close look at it, we can see this eye design. Next, we'll need to use the game's camera to see this, but in the interrogation room, if you look into the lens on the projector, you can find this picture. Next, let's take a look at some things we can find around town. Right in front of the theater, we can find this small pile of dirt with a shovel sticking out of it. It really feels like someone or something is buried here. Seeing as digging goes against social norms in our town, I wonder if Danielle had something to do with this. Also, I noticed this here in quarantine, but this has looked like this since Pathologic too. When facing the theater front on, I can't help but see this tragedian mask as being polyhedron shaped. From now on, this is always going to be the polyhedron mask to me, and I wonder if this was an intentional design choice. If we head over to Peter's apartment, outside his door we can find a bathtub filled with bottles and a candle on his doorstep. These things are normally here, but the candle has actually been slightly moved, and the color of the bathtub has been changed from white to red. This next thing is something I missed on my first playthrough. When traveling through the gut, you can find that the rioting townspeople have hung Capella, and despite it looking like her hands are bound, there's actually nothing tying her hands together. Also, one of the ropes behind her has a segment that's just floating and isn't connected to anything. In the hindquarters, the executors tell you that there's a dead looter somewhere who's in possession of a firearm, and Clara asks you to find her twin, and you can actually find both of them. If you make the first left you can and go past these crates and wagons, you can find Clara, and in this playground, you can find the dead man with the gun. Looting the gun even removes it from the environment as well, which is a nice detail. At the end of the district, you can find this supply crate that was meant to be delivered to the hospital. Looting it will give you various drugs and some ammo. I didn't notice this until recently, but there's a second of these crates near the district entrance, right by those wagons and crates the other Clara is by. The same goes for the infected person you can euthanize. There's the one here that's used to teach you about the mechanic, and near the exit gate you can find the second person to euthanize. One of the patients we examine in the hospital requires us to further examine his home in order to get an accurate diagnosis. This is Filot. Somewhere in the development phase, Filot had his name changed to what we know him as now. If we watch the hospital gameplay reveal trailer, we're shown parts of the Bachelor examining Filot's home. Here, Filot is referred to as Vasily instead. Internally, the game even still refers to Filot as Vasily. If we use the debug to load Filot's house, it's called House Vasily. And if we were to add his room key to our inventory, we'd have to add Vasily room key in order to get it. I noticed that the town's map hasn't been updated to correctly reflect all the new walls all over town. There's little discrepancies all over the place if you pay attention. Places like the Stillwater and the playground by the theater have new walls fencing you in, but the map shows that these are open areas. There's plenty of other small details that are incorrect all over the place, which I believe is due to the fact that this is exactly the same map as Pathologic 2. The only changes are the color scheme and the annotations showing the exit gates. Although the town is just as it was in Pathologic 2, the outskirts of the map do have some new things. This is as much as we can zoom out, but if we click and hold and drag the map past its limit, we can find some pretty interesting things. Starting in the top left, there's a compass we can find in the corner. The step has these veins or cracks, and there's a few weird stone formations out here. All around the edges, we can find these labeled diagrams. In the bottom left corner, we have this lovely bull. Next to this is some text you can normally see without having to push the map. This crossed out word says a huge heart, and underneath it says, "Do you see now how many secrets the earth hides?" Beneath that, the tracks lead out to some abandoned or crashed train cars, and in the bottom right, the Gorkin splits off into another delta. Moving to the top right, the Gorkin splits in half to create an island, and around the step is a few huts presumably used by the kin. And last, we've got a hidden message up top. This one's written in Italian, and it says, "The blame, as usual, will be cried out against the injured party, but just vengeance will serve as witness to the truth that wields it." This is an excerpt from Dante's Divine Comedy. I'm not exactly sure the context or how this reflects to Pathologic 3, but I love me a good Easter egg and reference. When speaking with the executors in the hindquarters, they'll tell you they've confiscated some ammo and the Bachelor can either take it or tell them to give it to Town Hall and have it specifically delivered to a gray-haired little man who goes by the name Crow, Jackdaw, or something similar. For the life of me, I can't imagine who the Bachelor is referencing and why they would need ammo, so I assume this gray-haired little man is a new character that we'll hopefully get to see in the full release. After that wheel crashes into us, we're shown the day Danielle tried to escape from the town. And in order to do so, we have to fight off the Shabnak. Trying to get past her without lighting the fire or trying to run off into the step will have her grab you, pick you up, and kill you. Anything outside lighting the fires will have the Shabnak kill you, but it's possible to die in a different way here. When the Shabnak moves to the train car, if you don't light the next fire and just walk in, then the Shabnak doesn't even touch the Bachelor and he just falls over. I guess the smell of decaying bodies was really that bad, huh? In the Thanatica, there's quite a few things that are possible to miss here. Sitting on the corner of one of the counters is Isidore Barak's message. Having heard of the Thanatica shutting down, Isidore invites the Bachelor to study Simon Kind in an attempt to save his life's work. Collecting this note is also needed for an achievement. In this desk drawer, next to the suitcase, you can find the revolver. Whether or not you found this will affect the following scene with Seraphima. As he exits the lab, Seraphima worries for Daniel's safety and will give him the revolver if he doesn't already have it. This also comes with a few lines of different dialogue. In the corner of the lab, we can find a butterfly enclosure. If we look at Daniel's thoughts, we can see that they used to keep Calyptra the lactree here, and that they feed on blood. Calyptra the lictree, as well as all the other insects we see here, are indeed real insects, I'm pretty sure. And so is the fact that Calyptras feed on blood. Because of this behavior, they are more commonly known as vampire moths, which I think is pretty cool. Moving out to the hallway, there's quite a few different interactions we can have here with the officers. Normally how this works is you would aim your gun at them, they'll put their hands up, and you can walk past. If you try to walk past without aiming your weapon, you'll be pulled into dialogue and escorted away, which results in a failure here and reloads the game. You can also try to shoot the guards, which results in the officer saying, "He's out of ammo," and the screen goes to black and the game reloads, and you can hear as they beat the Bachelor. In this hall, we can find Daniel the dinosaur. Apparently, a few graduate students have named this fossil after the Bachelor due to him having his face shoved against the wall, implying he's banging his head against the wall like Daniel. If we examine the door to the Thanatica, we can see one of the many times we see the Bachelor say a phrase in Latin. I was curious, and I'm sure you are too, so I'm going to tell you what he's saying in a handful of these quotes. Just a warning, there's a chance I misunderstand some of these phrases, and there's an even higher chance of me mispronouncing all of these. This one, aut cum scuto, aut in scuto, translates to with sword or on shield, which is a phrase Spartan mothers said to their sons before they went to battle, basically meaning do or die, win or die, or trying or no retreat. When speaking with the executor in the step, he'll question how one can sleep with their decisions and regrets, and the Bachelor can respond with vita somnium breve, which means life is a short dream. When Seraphima asks if Daniel is armed, he can reply with, "I'm not fond of weapons. He gladio ferit, gladio perit." This one means, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. He's basically just stating his aversion to weapons. If you already have the revolver, when Seraphima asks you this, the Bachelor will say, "I am. Praemonitus, praemonitus. At least I can shoot myself with this if I fail." Praemonitus, praemonitus means forewarned is forearmed. I think this is along the lines of being informed and prepared gives you an advantage. When getting arrested by the guards, the Bachelor can say, this is gonna be horrendous.
Freeze.
Well then, ubi nihil valus, ibi nihil valus, which means where you are worth nothing, then you will wish for nothing. This is a philosophic quote that suggests that you should not desire things in areas which you have no power, which is fitting for the fact that if the Bachelor did get escorted away here, he would have never had the chance to leave for the town on Gorkin. In the theater, a tragedian suggests that we take supplies from the hospital to help ourselves, and Daniel says, "You could have just said, medice cura te ipsum," or, "Physician, heal thyself." In the hindquarters, an executor will tell you that wherever the plague goes, Clara shows up, and because of this, they believe her to have something to do with it. The Bachelor can respond to this with, "Quite interesting indeed. Cum hoc ergo propter hoc." This one means, with this, therefore, because of this, which I think describes a cause and effect relationship which is actually false. There's plenty more of these Latin quotes, but we're going to stop with these next two achievements. The achievement for correctly diagnosing all three patients is called Medicum Morbo Abhuri. Upon researching this one, I found out that this is something the Bachelor says during the opening of the original Pathologic.
I will perform the operation. Medicum morbo adhibe.
Don't you go all bossy on me, clever clogs.
I'm pretty sure Medicum Morbo Abhuri means if someone is sick, then you consult a doctor. And last, the achievement for having the kin deliver some bulls to the hospital is called Quod licet lovi, non licet bovi, or gods may do what cattle may not. This is a double standard, meaning what one group of persons is allowed to do is not permitted by another person or group, such as obtaining a bull, which can only be done by a member of the kin. In the theater, when speaking with the Haruspecs, the Bachelor mentions not having the whole whose medicine works argument again, possibly referencing the intro of the original Pathologic and the theater debate dream from Pathologic 2. Later on in the Stillwater, we get to speak with Sticky, who references Pathologic 2's Marble Nest DLC. The Bachelor can question where he knows Sticky from, and Sticky will tell him that he was his assistant during the outbreak in the Stoneyard, which describes the events of the Marble Nest. Daniel questions whether or not that actually happened, so it's unclear if this is part of Daniel's confusion, or if it's just a reference, or if the Marble Nest has been canonized in some way. When Daniel's apathy meter is maxed out, he'll pull out a small pistol and shoot himself. This is a different weapon from his revolver, and if we examine a bullet, we're given a little more information on it. Daniel calls this weapon his pocket debutant, and he always keeps one last bullet in its chamber. By the exit gate in the marrow is a trash can. These things are all over the place, but this one is special because it's the only one Daniel has some thoughts about. Why am I even thinking about this? Bachelor Dankovsky would never rummage through the trash. I guess this is the devs' way of mocking us for assuming dumpster diving was going to remain a gameplay mechanic. Inside the theater, on a table on the back wall, we can find this small origami bowl. This is a neat find and all, but I can't help but notice that it includes, the thing that makes a bull a bull. Outside the still water, you'll come across this group of kids playing with the boat, which drifted a little too far from them. If you enter the still water and go back outside, then the kids will disappear and the boat will be out of the water. Upstairs in Daniel's room are a handful of things I want to highlight. In a corner of the room, we can find a little spinning top toy. Using it will increase your apathy. Sitting on the command desk is an interesting looking calendar? I'm not quite sure what to call this, but it's telling us the current date assuming it's being updated, which there's a chance it may not be. According to this, the current date is September 3rd. This one's hard to miss, but still interesting. We can find a map with the kind's plans for expanding the town drawn in. It's hard to tell if they're planning any more strange buildings or structures, but for some reason, they've decided that if you want to cross the river, you'll need to pass through the only bridge, which is located at the end of the cape. When you speak to Eva in the still water, your perspective will lower to match her point of view. This happens because Daniel is taking a seat to speak with her, and you can actually interact with the chair instead of interacting with Eva to sit down and enter a conversation. All the way back at the beginning in the capital, there are a couple things to find here. I feel like most of the community have noticed and talked about these, but I'm still going to mention them. First of all, Aglaya is here. The interesting thing about this is that this moment takes place after the Bachelor returns from his 12 days in the town, and Aglaya is here and alive. Hopefully this means her fate can be changed and at the end of the game she'll return with the Bachelor to the capital. The presence of the tragedians here raises a similar thought. In Pathologic 2, we've seen tragedians as reflections who tell us the inner thoughts of a character, but we've also seen them as stand-ins for the deceased. So these two tragedians could possibly be hinting at two other survivors who decided to leave the town and go with Daniel. In his thoughts, Daniel says someone died here, and whose reflection are you? So it really could be either survivors or just reflections, or maybe even both. Speaking of these tragedian thoughts, one of them says, "A fellow of most infinite jest, of most excellent fancy." This is actually a reference to a play by William Shakespeare. In Hamlet, this exact quote is said by the play's protagonist. Standing next to Aglaya is a very interesting character. I can't say for certain, but I've seen a lot of people calling this man Karminski, who if you didn't know is another Inquisitor, hence his similar attire to Aglaya. He's a character who's mentioned a few times in the first game. It was speculated that he, among a handful of other Inquisitors, would show up to deal with the town, but instead, everyone was surprised by Aglaya's arrival. Here in the capital, we hear of another character who may be expanded upon in Pathologic 3. When speaking with Platon, he mentions a scientist named Veronin, and out in the hall we can find a door to his office, and Daniel has a few thoughts about him. There are quite a few names thrown about during the capital sequence, but Veronin is interesting because this isn't the first time we've heard of him. Over a year ago, Icepick Lodge ran an ARG revolving around a character by the name of Fyodor Vitin. There was a point when Mr. Vitin was in need of help, and we as the participants were asked to contact the Central Bureau in order to assist him. Eventually, it was discovered that contacting this email in the persona of Andrei Veronin was what was necessary to progress the ARG, although there's not much to find about his character from the ARG. We're only told that Fyodor trusted him with access to some case files, and in quarantine, we learn that he's a scientist in the capital. Seeing as Veronin was mentioned in the ARG and was mentioned in the demo, I really hope he'll be a new character we get to see in Pathologic 3. In the same hall as Veronin's door, we can find this schedule. It's filled with the names of professors and the times of lectures they're holding. Well, one of these is a familiar name. The crossed-out lecture toward the middle is titled Law and Ethics in Medicine. Precedents, Paradoxes, Solutions, hosted by A. Lilich. That's right, this lecture was supposed to be taught by our Inquisitor Aglaya Lilich, before it was cancelled for some reason. After returning to the hospital and diagnosing the final patient, the game reveals to us whether or not our diagnosis was correct. You can check on your patient files in your casebook, and depending on if they were treated correctly, you can find some different notes from either Yakov Little or from the patient. Assuming you diagnosed all 3 patients incorrectly, you'll find these 3 letters, which you can pause to read. The notes on the first 2 patients are written by Yakov, and Vilat's note seems to be written by the kin boy we saw at his apartment. Here's the notes for correctly diagnosing all the patients. Luda and Finch's notes are written from them to the Bachelor, and Vilat's note is written by Yakov. Vilat's note is interesting because after being treated, Yakov writes that he went on to tell the orderlies and townsfolk about how wrong the Bachelor's quarantine measures are. I think this implies that the mob forming outside of the Stillwater was actually Vilat's doing. When we finish the capital sequence and we're sent to the town, we see this intro for day 5, which reads, in which the Bachelor winds up the people and has to rewind. Well, in one of Quarantine's updates, this specific line of text was changed. Originally, it read, Day 5, in which the Bachelor first gives up, then rises to the occasion. At the end of the game, we're given the option to travel to days 1, 2, 3, or 4. And doing so will let us see the intro text for each of these days. For day 1, we can read, in which Simon Kine mysteriously avoids meeting the Bachelor. Day 2 reads, in which the Bachelor disturbed the soil not once, but twice. For day 3, we've got in which the bell tolls. And for day 4, we get in which the Bachelor is forced to fight death with unexpected methods. When exiting the hospital, the Bachelor comes across a few Odongs. I found it funny that he'll try to do anything to explain their abnormality. In conversation with them, he'll question if they have neurofibroma, which is a type of cancer growth, and he'll also question if they have facial lymphedema, which is a type of swelling in the neck and head. He even questions if they're people in masks. Backstage in the theater, you can get an achievement called Richard and Linda if you interact with the gramophone. I've been told that this might be a reference to a show called Twin Peaks. I don't know anything about the show, so I'm not able to confirm this or tell you why a gramophone is relevant to the show, but the show does have 2 characters by the name of Richard and Linda. Here's another thing which I'm not sure whether or not is a reference to something, but sometimes when speaking to Platon, he will sing this.
Vita nostra brevis est, brevi finietur.
If you recognize what Platon's saying, feel free to inform us in the comments. And finally, to end off the video, I want to talk about some things we can find in the mind map we're shown during the interrogation. This is a timeline where Daniil made every wrong possible choice, and it's a timeline where we weren't in control of the Haruspects, so things have played out differently. Here we gain a glimpse to events we have yet to see, and some events we saw during Pathologic 2 from the Haruspects' point of view. On day 1, it's mentioned that something with a screaming woman and a crowd happened in an empty lot, but Daniil can't seem to remember exactly what happened. This is referring to the herb bride being burnt at the stake by the mob, who was convinced she was a Shabnak. I think that Daniil not fully remembering what happened here may possibly be hinting at some repressed trauma that resurfaces in his interpretation of the Shabnak. On day 2, a child tried to ask the Bachelor for help with a sick dog, and he decides it wasn't worth his time. This happened on the Haruspects' first day, but is referencing when the Soul and a Halves went to the Bachelor for help with Lika poisoning their dogs, and in Pathologic 2, the Bachelor refused to help, prompting Artemy to assist. On day 4, the Bachelor begins to question whether or not Simon Kine existed in the first place, and he wonders if this was some sort of trap to lure him to the town. I just think that this is going to be a fun plot point to explore in Pathologic 3. On the same day, he also mentions someone by the name of Telman, and questions if this trap is somehow his doing. In case you didn't know, Telman is another returning name from the original Pathologic. Apparently, he is an agent of the powers that be, and based off of this, the Bachelor seems not to trust him. Moving on to day 5, on this day, somehow both Maria and Ruben are found dead. For Ruben, we can assume that the kin caught up to him for his crimes, but what happened to Maria is a mystery. On day 7, the Inquisitor arrives, and she decides to question and execute Peter for refusing to share his blueprints on the polyhedron. It's also said that a relative of Simon was driven mad. My guess is that this is referencing the soul-sharing shenanigans the Kines get into in the later days of the first Pathologic. Connected to this thought is the realization that Yulia could have prevented it. Exactly what is meant by this is unknown. Next on day 8, Vlad the Younger is killed, presumably by the kin for the termitary situation, and on day 9, Katerina died, and Daniil says it's entirely his fault. On this day, Lara also attempts to assassinate the general, and without the Haruspex's intervention, she succeeded. And finally, on day 10, sadly, Eva Yan takes her own life. I can't wait for all of this to be expanded upon in Pathologic 3, but that brings us to the end of my list of fun facts, interesting things, and Easter eggs for Pathologic 3 Quarantine. If you have any more of these, feel free to share in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, and goodbye.